designer and a branding guy and a package designer and a UX engineer. So,
Might I add, all of those in varying degrees.
okay, and we'll see all those degrees up here. Right?
There's a distribution on that graph. So.
Okay, great. So after Mike's done talking, I'll come out with this mic for Q&A if people have questions. Okay, so nothing else. Mike.
So thanks everybody. So my name is Mike Moss. And there's a couple of things I'm going to talk about. I'll just give you a brief intro and synopsis of why I'm going to talk about these things. The main thing is I've had a lot of unexpected paths. I started out as a fine artist. I ended up working on technical tools at Google for site reliability and engineering tools. It's kind of a very odd path. And I've had to change my mentality, my mindset several different times. It was not easy. It was very difficult, but it was very rewarding at the end. So what I want to talk about is I'm going to focus the talk on, I'm going to give you a tour of the different mediums and what I explored, what I learned out of each one of them. But then when I get into the school aspect of graphic design and then UX design, both in the real world and in school, I want to show you and give you a mentality for what you need to be prepared for. That's my main thing, because I want to save you time from some of the suffering I had to go through, because there were certain things I wasn't really prepared for. So let's just go on. Let's just give you an intro as to where I'm from. Originally from New York. And I'm going to talk about the mediums I've explored. So they're drawing and painting, photography, graphic design, and that includes both in school and in the field. And then finally, user experience design. And I'm going to give you a couple of case studies of that to show you where I'm coming from. So as I said just a moment ago, each of these, they give me a little bit of extra skills that unexpectedly led to the next. So the beginning is New York City in the 80s. So it was the dawn of graffiti. So my first real exposure to art and mischief, a little bit of both, was through graffiti. And it was perfect for me because I was about 13 years old. I was kind of a troublemaker, but I also started to do art. So it was the perfect mix. I could get away with things and I could make things. Sounds good to me. So these were my heroes back then. These were guys starting in the Bronx. It was the main focus that I knew because I lived about 5 miles out of the Bronx. My family's from the Bronx. So this is all the 80s. Trains and handball courts. Anyone who lives in the East Coast knows about handball. It's a quick way to play a sport with minimal effort and resources. And you had legends like Dondi. And we would watch them at the train stations for specific artists to roll in. We would hear about trains that would get painted. We'd sit there and wait for hours to snap a photo. Most of us didn't even have cameras back then, just to even see it. And this is what the inside of the car looked like. Hopefully I didn't see those guys, because I was jumping turnstiles, so I never want to see those guys. That's the last thing I want to see. So in my contributions, I hope you're sitting down, looks like you are, pretty modest. So this is one of my drawings. You can see, look at that. 1984. That was the dawn, right? Yeah. You can see my masterful composition, how I ran out of space over here. So anyone do graffiti out here? Anyone interested in graffiti? A few of you, okay. So I had several tag names. This is one of them, my first one. So I was really big, as you can see, kneecaps were really important. I mean, my first delving into anatomy. So it's a precursor, right? And I had really complex color schemes like yellow, black, and red. So yeah, you gotta watch out for me. So then basically from there, a few things transpired. I actually was not really that much of an artist during most of high school, besides graffiti. I was much more into sports. I was actually originally going to go into sports medicine because it was a way of staying connected. But I ran into an art teacher in college. I took a drawing class on a lark, and he told me, hey, you should really look into this. So I started looking into it, ended up applying to art school. So when I went to art school, I encountered the first of these three, what I'm calling ways of thinking. I'm probably even using this in the wrong sense, but it just makes sense to me. So I'm calling this a representational phase. What I mean by that is, I wanted to look at things, and I wanted to make things that look like the things I was looking at. So there's an apple, I want to make the apple. There's a person, I want to make it so you say, oh, that's Dave, that's Joe, that's Susan. So what I started with is painting and drawing. And what I want to warn you about on this is that this is a really glossed over view of my work. Because what you're not seeing here is you're not going to see tens of thousands of drawings I laid on the floor when I was frustrated, paintings I painted over or just took a knife to and tore up. So there's a lot of iterations. So you're just seeing the little end result. So whenever you're doing either a design, a sculpture, a painting, a photograph, I've learned the hard way. You really, even for a photograph, they tell you you don't even really start to take decent images till 10,000 images. Drawing's the same, designs are the same. So what I started doing, and this is a Degas quote here. Anyone knows who he is? Drawing is not the same as form, it's a way of seeing form. So again, I'm exploring how to make things look like the things that they look like. So drawing is exploring. And to do that, you want to play with line, you want to play with shape. There's many different types of drawing. This is a line drawing specifically, so you're looking at rhythms. You're looking at, as you can see, I'm looking here in this slide, I'll go back one there. I'm looking at very simple, I don't know what's going on here, but this is not kosher. So I'm looking at simple lines, I'm looking at rhythms. I'm not being too fussy. This is not a lot of rendering here. That's not the point. So for each one of these things, there's different exercises. Same here. So this is just one page. So it tells you I'm just going to town. The more, the better. That's what's important here. And I'm starting to think about form. I'm starting to put in these lines here so you can see how the human form works. And if you're anyone who's not drawing and is interested in drawing, going to life classes is one of the best things you can do because it's the most challenging. It's the most complex form there is. So then, now we're starting to get more into static imagery and refined drawing. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to control the space. So you saw in my drawing before, my graffiti drawing, how I lost control of space. So what I'm trying to do now, and I had a really good instructor starting to teach me this concept called envelopes. So I'm trying to envelop the figure in space so I have control over the page. And this comes in really big handy in graphic design. So finally, we start getting into rendering. So now I'm concerned with light and shadow and how form works. I'm looking at individual characteristics. So you can unmistakably know it's her. Again, I'm trying to make the things that I see look like the things that I see. Same with portraiture. So even more rendering here. I'm trying to search through planes, really specific character features, really unique things. The cheekbones of this particular woman at a point in time. That's unique to her. So after I was drawing, I started to approach color. I was actually encouraged by my teachers to withdraw from color as much as possible until you've solved problems in the drawing. So a lot of times if you're having problems in design, you're having problems in fine art, and you can't make a painting, you can't make a design work, go back and sketch. Go back to the beginning. I gave some of you advice today, and I heard about that, this idea of if you can shrink it down and make it work very simply and graphically without detail, then you have a way you can blow it back up and keep the concept. So these are painting explorations. Now, again, now we're getting into render form. So I was never much of a conceptual artist. Some of you are. I was really, my whole thing was I just wanted things to look like they were. Not really deep statements. I wanted to explore light. So this is oil on wood. And then I started looking at pop items. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the work of Wayne Thiebaud. You might recognize some of the homage to this. Thiebaud is phenomenal, one of the best painters of last century. But I was doing a more rendered view of his work. So now, I started getting into plein air painting. So I wanted to be outside, I wanted to work live. It's exhilarating, you can only work a little bit at a time. I used to work in really bad neighborhoods. It was very strange because there'd be heroin addicts and drug dealers in the street, and it'd just be me painting. People would come over. One guy fell asleep on my shoulder when I was painting on the ground. I didn't have the heart to wake him, so I just kept painting. Eventually he woke up and walked away. This is one of the paintings I did of a series of old theaters. And in fact, I was lucky because I timed this. This theater had been closed for 10 years, 100 feet from my house. Next year, gone. And they replaced it with condos, and they made a fake version of this sign that was nothing like the original sign. This is one of the first I think one of the first neon signs on the West Coast, actually, for theater marquees. So, what did I learn? Line, form, composition, color. Pretty straightforward stuff. The basics. These are the mechanics of controlling space, planes. So next, I got into photography. It's a little bit, this is not in exactly chronological order, because at this point, I started going to design school. And in school, I don't know what they're making you do here, but when you have photography, unless you absolutely need to use stock because you need a picture of the Taj Mahal or Big Ben, you have to shoot it yourself. And that was another brutal lesson. So this is the first time that I actually started to now think like a photographer, which was more difficult, because if you look at the other work that I was doing, I'm consciously controlling the center of the page. But a lot of photography, if you just keep everything center of the page, it ends up being boring. So what I started to do now is activate the edges. So what I did, well, let me go for this first. So photography is an immediate reaction, drawing is a meditation. And I'll go into this in terms of photography in a second. So I had the chance to do a lot of traveling over the years. So I was very fortunate and I had the time off and I had some money saved. And I ended up going across the Silk Road. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the Silk Road. It's one of the largest, longest, most ancient trade routes in the world, connecting China and connecting Europe. So what I did was I planned it out, got my passports to hard-to-get Soviet republics, and hit the road. And so my first stop was in China. My last stop was in Istanbul, Turkey. So the first thing, this is just some snippets of these. So as you can see here, what I'm starting to already learn now, this is already after taking probably 40,000 pictures. So again, there's a lot of cutting room floor stuff that you never see. And even then, I probably took 150 pictures of this woman to get the 3 maybe that I thought were acceptable. So if you see what I'm doing here, is now I'm actually looking around the outer bounds of the picture plane. In a painting, I've never been able to pull this off in a representational painting. Abstract painting have a lot more leeway. So what I'm starting to do now is play with color, play with motion. We have a curvature here. We're starting to get outside the picture plane. We're starting to leave certain things unsaid. And that's what a good photograph can do, at least to my mind. Contrast and scale is another one. You can play with what's in focus versus what's out, what's small, what's large, what's new, what's old. And you find a lot of this in design. I'm sure everybody has gone through, anyone who's doing graphic design here has had nights where they're staying up trying to match type into an image. And they're cropping the image, they're bringing it out, they're bringing it in, they're adjusting the type. That's the game. So as I was doing this, I was actually thinking about that too, unconsciously. So for instance here, you might have room for type here. To me, this image was just simply about scale. This is the Chinese highlands near Tibet, and these are yaks, and they're dotting the landscape. So what I'm trying to do, at least for me, is reflect the sense of grandeur and hugeness that I saw. And I'm from New York. You never see past a few blocks. You guys have a little bit more big sky country out here. And again, now what I'm starting to play with is anticipation and motion. So for instance, here, you have this young monk who was late, was running. I saw him running down the path. So what I tried to do is position it so he's tangential to the story, but there's a little sense of anticipation. About 2 seconds later, he ran down the path and disappeared. Same thing here. This is actually a pilgrimage route. This is a monastery called the Lebrun Monastery. So what I wanted to do here was get this sense of circular motion. There's diagonals going through the picture here. There's people going clockwise. So I waited, and a lot of photography is waiting. So when you're taking pictures for your assignments, it's almost like capturing wildlife photography. You're going to wait a long time before that bird comes over, or that whatever it is, the raccoon, whatever you're looking for, or the life form, the human, to do something. A lot of photography is about waiting. So I waited a long time, probably took about 100 exposures till I saw those guys outside of the picture plane. And I waited for them to get this sense of motion. Straight up portraiture, making use of shallow depth of field. This is his artwork in the background. This is a Tibetan painter. Again, scale. if that figure wasn't in there, you probably wouldn't really realize how big that Buddha statue is. It was huge. I was totally surprised. When you start adding in people, and you'll see in some of the other photographs, you start getting a sense of scale. Again, scale. And now what I'm trying to do is I'm activating the edges of the picture plane. So what I'm looking at here is almost X motion going here. The car is facing this way. Even the figures, because of the distortion of my lens, are actually leaning a little bit this way. And I actually didn't try to correct too much of that. I wanted a sense of going down and going out. And so much of design is controlling the picture plane. And what you're trying to do is either get them somewhere or keep them inside to deliver the message. This is a little bit more of just me looking at patterns. I waited. I saw those guys going across. I didn't know if they knew each other, but I waited. And sure enough, there's the payoff. More about contrast, silhouette, trying to tell a story about these street vendors at night. So it's what you can, a lot of times with photography and also design, it's actually what you leave out. If this was fully rendered, I don't know if this would work as well as an image. I'm not sure. Maybe someone else can take a better picture. I'm sure 1,000 people can. This is good time. Again, a little bit of anticipation. This is a happy moment. Basically, you have motion coming in from the bread. You've got a red door, red scooter, red towel. Total coincidence, just waiting. You have a cluster of white papers, a white hat, and then you have motion. So these are the kind of things that only happen when you wait or when you iterate. Another thing, playing with scale. Playing with also kind of contrast, white figure. A lot of other structures here in various states of aging. Another contrast piece. Without that figure, I was trying to shoot, and I was really struggling because I was trying to tell people the sheer sense of scale. This is in Uzbekistan. And I wanted people to know the sheer sense of scale that I was feeling. It's overwhelming. This place is huge. But I wouldn't get that until I saw this figure. And then it dawned on me that I can actually tell the story this way. So I kept snapping, and I waited till he was about in the center. And then you have these shapes here that kind of envelop the picture. So right now I'm talking very technical. Remember, I'm unrepresentational right now. Okay? So another portraiture. A lot of gold grills in Central Asia. That is a fashion statement. It's fascinating. You'll see people with full gold grill teeth. And they were very friendly, so a few shots of those were fun. Another thing about anticipation, waiting for the cat. I saw that cat coming. I knew it had to cross the path at some point. Another scale piece. This is in Turkmenistan. This is called Darvaza, which translates into the gates of hell. And just a little fun trivia. In 1971, the Soviet oil rig, natural gas rig, collapsed into the earth, leaving a burning hole, which is still burning to this day. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. You've heard of it? Yeah, it's bizarre. Yeah. And I didn't even get the scale right because that's an SUV. And it's actually much bigger than even in the picture. I couldn't even do it justice. I couldn't get the right angle to show you, or at least to show myself how big it was. So this picture is about kind of abundance and variety. So I wanted these diagonals here, so I had to get up above without the mall guards chasing me down because these are post-Soviet paranoid regimes that think everybody's spying on them. So immediately after taking this picture, I was told "Nilzya," which means forbidden in Russian. So I had to walk away. Another one about scale. This is a leader who thinks quite highly of himself, obviously. This is one of many statues in the city. This is a very, very different place. Fascinating. And these are people that, these are cleaners who I was told were nicknamed ninjas because they're quiet. They go in and out and clean very quietly, and they just disappear. And a lot of the parts of this part of the city, it's almost desolate. So you're left with these grandiose sculptures and paeans to the leader. So I thought it was an interesting contrast. So this is Azerbaijan. This is in the Caucasus region of the Soviet republics. And so again, I was playing with the idea of the landscape being these rolling rolling past us. So I waited, again, waiting, it's a key, patience, waiting, iterating. I can't stress that enough. I waited for a car of contrasting color. I really actually wanted a light blue car. I couldn't find it. So this is a red Lada, old Soviet vehicles. Now, again, I'm playing with the edges of the picture frame. This little dog here, looking out over the plains. I don't know if anyone, what I was thinking when I shot this, and anyone know Christina's World by Andrew Wyatt? Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, the woman in the corner on the grass looking out at his grandeur. It just happened to snap in my mind. So again, actually, my art education means that I'm actually looking at some of these photographs like paintings I've seen years ago. Even unconsciously, just, I don't know, just showed up. Again, a little bit playing with the picture frame. You have an X going across here. This is in Georgia, the Republic of Georgia. We have these steep mountains and these old guard towers. So I spent some time hiking through these and captured some of the landscapes here. Again, activating the edges and looking at layers. This actually, on retrospect, I spent a lot of time looking at Japanese water block prints, which are phenomenal examples of composition. And anyone who's studying design in this room should go out and get as many books, or just literally just Google Japanese woodblock prints and make a collection on a computer, because they're the undisputed masters of composition. You'll always learn something from them. Another portrait. This is a blind saddle maker in Azerbaijan. Old portrait. Thought it was an interesting old photo tint type. I'm not even sure what this is. Not a daguerreotype, but it's a photo tint. Playing with patterns. Again, I was trying to capture scale here. This is along the Black Sea coast of northeastern Turkey. This is towards the end of the trip. Breaking bread with somebody in the mountains. So I wanted to get this dynamic here. You have a diagonal here, and then you have a kind of a downward curve here, and then you have this here, which is the motion. So trying to think in terms of these lines and motion. Now I'm trying to think in terms of how can I abstract street life in a way that instead of just taking a regular portrait of him, what can I do? So I found these mirrors and I just kept angling back and forth to see if I could capture. I actually wanted to see if I could capture a fourth face in there. It's just, that's life. Street Cats in Istanbul. There's actually a documentary, I'm just going to digress for a second, called Kedi. Yeah, very good documentary on street cats in Istanbul. Very cute, very nice. So again, here, diagonals. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to activate the picture plane. This is the distant focal point. But what I want to do is I want to draw contrast in here. And that was the last picture. That's the Galata Bridge in Istanbul. That was my last stop after 4 months. I was tired, had a good time. And what I learned. So in this trip, I learned storytelling, because some of my sequences, some of the stuff you won't see here, is I followed some people over a course of time. I learned focus, what to literally focus on in terms of sharpness and contrast. Contrast, composition. So these are the things I learned from this. And they're going to carry in here. Oh, by the way, also, asking questions. The reason I put that one in there is because to get a lot of these photos, I would feel really uncomfortable just treating someone like an animal zoo and walking around and shooting photographs like I see a lot of tourists doing. I feel very uncomfortable that way. So what I actually always do when I travel is I really don't take photos of anybody without talking. And so everybody whose portrait you see here, I've actually engaged in a conversation, which was actually for me either terrible Russian or terrible Arabic. So, but enough to get the point across and show that I'm respectful. Because without that, it's really, I feel like it's disrespectful to the person involved. They're not here for my amusement. So this is the second stage. This is conceptual. This was a hard one for me, because I was so used to looking at things the way I thought they were in the world. Now I have to think about things in an abstract way. How did I do that? It was baptism by fire, it was graphic design. So thinking in symbols, order, systems of understanding. So for a while, what I actually had to do was I actually had to put away all my painting and drawing because it was too literal. So my first graphic design assignments, which I will not show under penalty of death, were completely literal, boring as heck, and they just didn't work. Because I was trying to be representational when I need to be symbolic and conceptual. So design is the intermediary between information and understanding. So your task as a designer is to get the information to somebody, communicate it to them, ideally in a way they remember it, and ideally in a way they act on it. Obviously, in an ethical manner, perhaps, right? So I'm going to present a couple case studies from the Design MFA. So the first assignment is question: how do you make a brand extension for a men's skincare line from a brand known for something else? I don't know. What do I do? So let me look at brands that might translate to a men's skincare line. So I chose John Deere. Thought that was a fun brand. Everybody knows it. So what do we got here? We got a symbol, and we got some letters, kind of a strong form. So I thought, what are the keywords? So now, I'm starting to think conceptually, right? Industrial, rugged, durable. Those are the three that I thought of. So what I do next is I make a mood board. So my instructors are very sharp, and they would have us put together a pastiche of images that get the kind of the gist of what might be. So you have a lot of hands, you have heavy type here, you have numbers, you see these kind of shapes, you have rust. There's an element of danger. But tungsten, I don't know if anyone knows this font, fantastic typeface. A little bit of character here. You've got almost a sign painter motif. You've got tire treads. So the next is you sketch. And this is where the drawing comes back. And this is where the iteration is again. Like I said, I did way more logo sketches than these. These are just the ones I prettied up for the portfolio. So there's just pages of crap that you're not going to see. So what I ended up coming up with is a brand called Buck. Buck for men. So I'll show you what I ended up with the logo. That was the logo. So kind of big, impactful type. A little bit of a solid shape here. And I'll show you a little bit more about where the influences came from. Because remember, the one thing I want you to take away from this talk is you have to actually be prepared to defend your ideas, both in school and especially in the real world. And I got really beat up at a couple agencies for not being able to do that. It was very difficult. So what I did was I took various shapes. So if you look at this razor, you look at this encasing element, right? What could be more kind of aggressive or sturdy than a razor? Represents a little bit of danger, of shaving. Then the other one was sign painting. I thought it was kind of an honest craft. We do it with our hands. It's got a lot of authenticity. So I blended those together, and that was some of my conceptual thinking for this logo. So now let's see it in action. So this is a shampoo, as you can see. Separated the deer from the logo in this case, making it an emblem. Ended up using a slab serif font. Sorry if anyone's not a designer, you're going to get bored on this, so you have to bear with me. Slab serif, a little bit of a rugged typeface. And then we had to make a stand. So again, sketching. And then the thing I do want to mention, though, is that you don't have to be an artist to sketch. Sketching is just for even for your thinking. So there's a lot of people who won't sketch because they say, "Oh, I don't know how to draw." It's total BS. You don't need to know how to draw. A lot of this is back of a napkin, if you've heard that expression before. A lot of great ideas come from the back of a napkin. There's even a book about it. And it's when you're not actually too caught up in making things look good. What you want to do is you want to capture those ideas, because if you don't capture them, you're going to forget about them. So as you can see here, I'm looking at tire treads. I'm looking at the wheel. I'm influenced by a nut. We've got the hexagon. And this is going to be a retail display. What I ended up with is this. So I've got elements of wood. I've got the metal. I've got a tire tread. I raised the emblem. And this would be the full skincare line in a retail display. So the main thing is that I was able to pass this class because at each step of the way, I did a lot of the thinking and failing that I can get a conceptual framework that I can get up in front of the class and tell them, that's why I chose this. Is it the best design? No, there's plenty of people who can do better. But could I defend it? Yes, that's what's important. There is no